Hi, my name is Pamela Duncan and I am a data journalist with the Irish Times. I know people often come up and say things like I'm unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, but I really am unaccustomed to public speaking. So don't ask me anything too hard at the end, be nice to me. In my workplace I'm considered a total data geek, and that's mainly because I work with Excel documents and play with data visualizations. But I have a feeling that most of you today have the data bug worse than I do, so I feel in very good company, and also probably I'm a bit of a novice in comparison with some of you. In recent times, in recent months, I've been dedicating most of my time to this. This is a mock-up of the Irish Times data page, so it's a bit wonky, so forgive that. You can find the actual site at irishtimes.com/data, and please do come visit us, we'd love to have you. The Irish Times data is a group effort. Along with me, there's another journalist. We have a lead data scientist, Bahara Harabi, who is in the audience here to keep an eye on me. Graphic sub-editors, design editor, etc. But I'm the only one that gets to call myself a data journalist. And so recently I go to weddings and they say, oh, so you work for the Irish Times, what do you actually do? And I say I'm a data journalist, and they go, what the hell is that? So I suppose that's the first point that I'd like to come to, is what is data journalism? So Paul Bradshaw, who's a data blogger and data journalist in the UK, summed it up pretty well when he said it's new possibilities that open up when you combine the traditional nose for news and ability to tell a compelling story with the sheer scale and range of digital information now available. I suppose if I had anything to add to that, it's that not only do we have a lot of data available now, we also have the tools to present that data in a way which is relevant to the individual interest of the reader. And we'll see as I go on how that can be at a county or local school level, or even just their name. So the Irish Times data was born in February of this year. February 3rd we went live. And this is one of the first things that we did. It's quite a simple story in ways, but I wanted to show it to you for a number of reasons. And if I can, I'll just show you the actual web page itself. Oh. So we took 10 years of data from the CSO, which I'm a big fan of. And from that we were able to build, if this will allow me, a tool which allowed people to check to see how their name had fared in popularity over the last 10 years. So you'll see it's actually quite a simple tool. So you go in, you pick your name from a drop-down menu, and you figure out how it has fared in the last number of years. One of the reasons I'm showing it to you is because it was the single most popular post we've had on the data blog so far. It amassed 170,000 hits within a week of going live. I mean, that's a lot, right? And one of the reasons I think it did that is because this story demonstrates really well how data journalism can speak to people at an individual level. We identified trends and we wrote a whole story around it, but it was really people's curiosity about the data that drove it, so their individual curiosity. Also, what worked was the simplicity of the graph. We played with a lot of stuff, but in the end we went with this, and I think that that's something that data can suffer from sometimes. You present these amazing graphics, but the ordinary person can't actually understand it, they can't access it, and you've got to keep the end user in mind when you're developing these things. As I say, this data came from the CSO. We had some initial teething problems with it, but when we got back to the CSO and we said, actually what we're looking for is all the data you have on all the names over the last 10 years, and they were incredibly helpful. They gave it to us in an accessible format. They got it, and it's brilliant when people do that, but unfortunately it's not always the case. And I suppose the getting good, reliable data in accessible format is one of the single biggest challenges that faces us when we're trying to write stories. So I have to admit something. With the exception of my secondary school maths teacher, nobody is more surprised that I'm working with numbers than I am, because I am useless. I'm not technical. I'm not, I'm crap at all that sort of stuff. But after I started with the Irish Times, my sister, who is an accountant, introduced me to Excel, and this is a project I was interested in doing. In 2011, the Greens had left government. We had an election. Fianna Fáil got kicked around this. I mean, it was a disaster for them. I think it was the worst election defeat of any sitting government in the history of the state. But on foot of that, a lot of these very unpopular politicians were leaving power, and they were going to get very big pensions as a result. And so we said, well, I wonder how much all these people are going to get. And we went to look for the data, and it wasn't available. So we went to, there were two, it comes from two different sources. They give you all these guidelines, but you can't, you have to figure it all out for yourself. It's just not openly accessible. So we used Excel to build this, and at the time I didn't even realize this was data journalism. It was just an Excel sheet, and I really didn't realize the path that this would bring me down. But this was our first story. So we were able to calculate very accurately all of the pensions to outgoing TDs. You'll see a few familiar faces there. If your blood pressure is rising, I can just move straight along. What we uncovered, on the broader picture, was that of the outgoing TDs accumulatively, TDs and ministers, we're going to get €13 million in goodbye monies, the termination payments, and lump sums, and I don't know, all these other things that they say they need. And then €4 million in pensions thereafter. And I think that there's a big public interest in this, but also it set off a debate about, well, are we getting, is it right that these people are getting such high amounts of money, and made for a very good data story. Some of the reasons that it worked, I think, was because A, it was a really good story of public interest, but also because we were able to drill it down and present it in this way, that you could see what your individual TD was getting. And that's one thing I love about data journalism, is that we're able to drill down to that level and present it in that way. Now, of course, part of the problem for journalists traditionally has been, this is, of course, as a data journalist, it's only natural that I should experience these technical problems. One of the problems for journalism traditionally has been space constraints, because we have a physical paper every day. But what we're finding, with the data blog, is that we're able to, we have much more space than we used to. So, if this will load. This was a story we did on school segregation. So each year the Department of Education go into the schools and they take census details from each of the schools. And one of the things they ask for is nationality data. And what we found when we looked at the data was that there was a very small amount of schools were catering to the vast majority of children who are of immigrant origin. Now, there are problems with this data set, and I think if you do have problems with the data set, then you have to be absolutely transparent with the reader, and we did put in provisions in our article saying, some schools collect this data in different ways. But one of the things that we discovered was that actually we have, one of the things that came out of this is that we do need an awful lot more research on this. Now, like I say, 5 years ago, this would have been 800-word article in the paper, people say tomorrow's fish and chip wrapper or what have you. I don't think that happens anymore either, adding to the demise of newspapers. But when we have the data blog, we can do it in a whole different way. So this is information for every one of the almost 3,300 schools in the country. So you can see, and you can click into your individual school and find out what the spread of the nationality data is in your particular school. Again, this allows people to really drill down into the data. We also publish this data. We've developed a data bank, and so it allows people, for whatever reason, if they want to go in and reuse the data, that's fine with us. We like to see new visualizations coming our way. I really, really like it when people re-engage the data and they send it back to us. But it's up to the reader. You give more power to the reader because it's up to them what level of engagement they want to have with it. This next project was the bane of my existence for about 4 months. We looked at information on Sinn Féin, Friends of Sinn Féin, which is a fundraising organisation for Sinn Féin in the United States. So far, so simple. But when we went to look at the data, afterwards there was talk of, people were upset that we looked at Sinn Féin, but we would have equally looked at it if it was Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael or whoever, and actually we did look at Fianna Fáil after this. But the point is that they were getting quite large donations from certain people over a period of time, but they were all in this format. So as you can see, it's quite inaccessible. quite grainy, and a lot of all these documents were in different formats and different ways. So we brought it all together, we put it into a spreadsheet, and we allowed people to open it up. We found out about the cumulative donors who were giving the biggest amounts, and also we found some celebrity donors. Fionnuala Flanagan was one of them, Viggo Mortensen was another, and everybody absolutely went crazy over the fact that Viggo Mortensen had given Sinn Féin money. I don't know why everybody obsessed over that part. Maybe it was the Lord of the Rings thing. But it took an awful lot of work. So we uploaded all this data, we put it into optical recognition software. We looked at it, we checked it, we cleaned it. We had to do that for 15,000 entries before we were able to get a story out of it. So those are some of the big, and I suppose that's the huge challenge to us, is getting accessible data. And there's also a tendency for departments not to want to, for agencies more generally, not to want to give you the data in an accessible format. There is a fear that it'll be manipulated or misinterpreted, and I think that's a real challenge for data journalists who need to develop a reputation as well, to show people that we are going to treat the data in a responsible way. I am running out of time, which is great because I thought this was going to be a lot more painful than it was. But if I can just go back in here. So there are about 10 steps to a data story, which I only discovered when I thought about it for this presentation. To come up with the idea, you find out if the data is available. Oftentimes it is not. You think about ways around that. For example, who has the data? You go and you ring them. You try it through FOI. You're allowed to ask for it in electronic format. You don't always get it. There's a department which will remain unnamed, which used to at least print out an entire Excel sheet, send it to me in an envelope in the post, and say, here you go, digitize that. So that leads us to the next step, which is cleaning the data. We then interrogate the data, and that's something that Bahara is very instrumental in, because we have to be able to, if we're going to make it publicly available, we have to make sure that the data is sound. Then you hit the phones. Data journalism is not like this departure from traditional journalism. It should be a very much combination of the two things. And the very best data stories do those two things, like combine them really, really well. Visualize your data, because oftentimes, especially when you map data, you figure out much quicker what the story is than if you just have it in, a big spreadsheet. And after all those steps, you get to write a story, which is nice. And then you publish the story. And we're not just publishing the story now, but we're also publishing the data sets wherever possible. It's not always possible, but you can find them on our data bank. I have lovely examples of other data journalism abroad that I'm just not going to get to, but if anybody's interested, I can talk through some of these later on. There are some amazing data journalism projects going on around the world. And if you go to the GEN, I think have just this week, they published their shortlist for their data journalism competition this year. See that, it's amazing. Go to Upshot, they have done amazing work. Oh, I could just go on all day. So, in conclusion, I suppose, if I can find the actual part that I'm looking for, because I skipped all over this. The reason the Irish Times is interested in data journalism is because there's some seriously good, worthwhile stories in the available data. It has always been the job of data journalists to get those stories out, of all journalists to get the story out, and now more so because we have all this data available to us, we also need journalists to be able to figure it through. Now more than ever, we are inundated with data, as you all are well aware. So every time you get put on a hospital waiting list, you get clamped, there's potential for a story in an awful lot of these things. So it's not a fad, it's not something that's going to go away as more and more data becomes available. And if you take it to its natural conclusion,